And now we're joined by Kevin Sweeney, writes newsletters, analyst, SINow.com, College Basketball Central Pod, and he joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio. Kevin, thanks for your time. It popped up. I'd seen you on comments before, but I did see the one comment you made about Baylor's guard. You have it, Armstrong. This is a tweet from, I guess, Monday night. Adam Flagler is the most underappreciated star in college basketball. That was towards when Baylor was making the run to separate, which they did to beat Texas in Austin. He is a guy that was a very critical part of what they did last year in their championship run, but you do think that he's underappreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, there's so little room in the national discourse for guys to just star in their role. And I just think a guy like Flagler, who makes shots at a really high level, who's incredibly reliable, who's efficient, who's really good defensively, who leads his team. I just think those guys always deserve more love. And I think Flagler kind of fits that whole mold to the team. And he's been tremendous for this team. They would certainly not be where they are right now without him. And it feels like he's really raising his game right now when they need him most to make a push for a 1 seed.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on this last week in the Big 12 with Baylor kind of reasserting themselves as the defending champs and Kansas with 2 losses all of a sudden?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Kansas lost, coming off of a loss against Baylor to lose again against TCU. I think TCU is a better team than people give them credit for. I think they're really athletic, they're physical as heck. But I was a little surprised by that. I think it's the mark of a great coach in Scott Drew that they've been able to kind of right the ship after, some of those struggles, especially with all the injuries they've dealt with. And, I think they're in great position. I still think both of those teams are really good. I think Texas Tech is an outstanding basketball team. I believe Texas Tech can win a national championship. But I wasn't surprised necessarily by Baylor's surge as much as I was by Kansas losing to TCU.
Kevin, what do you think as far as the 1 seeds go right now?
So I have Baylor as the second overall seed in the field, thanks to the 12 quadrant 1 wins. I just felt like they deserved it over Arizona after the loss to Colorado. Obviously, that could shift, but I think Baylor's in tremendous shape. I think if they beat Iowa State this weekend, I'd be pretty surprised if Baylor doesn't wind up on the number 1 line, regardless of what happens in the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah, that's always nice to have, but that you can not even have to worry about it. It'd be good if you won. And would you think that helps them as well, Kevin, because they're playing such a – and everyone shrinks their lineup and rotation when the tournament starts, but they, as you know, they're putting up huge minutes among just 1 or 2 guys off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can help you to a certain degree to have that, have the rotation already figured out. It also can kind of hurt you in March. Obviously, you want to have the depth, but I think the fact that they're not going to have to run their guys into the ground during the Big 12 tournament trying to push for a 1 seed will certainly help them as they get into March Madness, especially given how kind of snake-bitten with injuries there. Every minute's a risk. So, I think that helps them. I do think there's a lot to play for. You want to be that number 2 overall seed, so you get to play in San Antonio over Arizona, who would also want that San Antonio spot over going to Chicago or going to Philly. So, there is something to play for there, but feeling good about your 1 seed heading into the Big 12 tournament would be a pretty nice prize for Scott Drew and company.
So you don't think that so if they go into the tournament as a 1 seed, you don't think the tournament would affect which 1 seed they are?
I think it could. Obviously, I think there's an outside shot they could get the number 1 overall seed if they were to win the Big 12 tournament. I don't think that would happen, but I wouldn't rule it out. Obviously, I think as long as they don't lose in the first game of the Big 12 tournament, I think they have a very good chance to wind up as the number 2. I think someone else would have to make something special happen, and I'm not sure Arizona, who's the top contender otherwise for that number 2 overall seed, is going to have the games to play. I mean, with the exception of UCLA, there aren't the needle-moving wins out there in the Pac-12 as there are in the Big 12.
Kevin, who else do you like as the ones right now, and what kind of battles are you looking at as far as these final week and, where – like a team like Kansas right now is kind of up in the air, but what, obviously Baylor you think's a 1. You just kind of touched on that there, but how do you see this battle for the 1s and 2s down this final week?
Yeah, so I have Gonzaga as number 1 overall and Baylor as number 2. Right now I have Arizona as the 3rd number 1 seed. They're not a lock to be on the 1 line if they were to lose again in the Pac-12 tournament. I have the 4th 1 seed right now as Auburn. and the 5th overall seed, the top two being Kansas. Now that could change. Again, I think, as it comes down the stretch here, Auburn has a relatively easy schedule this weekend. They play Mississippi State tonight, and then they play South Carolina, two NIT caliber teams. They should win those games. They win those games, they'll be in good position in the SEC tournament. I think Kentucky, if they were to win the SEC tournament, would have a great case for a number 1 seed. Duke, if they win out, will be in that conversation. I don't love their resume quite as much, but if they keep winning, it's going to be hard to keep 30-4 Duke off the number 1 line. So that's certainly worth watching as well. I think that's the battle right now. I think Arizona's pretty good. It's that 4th spot that really we're watching.
We don't seem to have that just collision course this year, do we, between Gonzaga and Baylor, and especially when that non-conference game was canceled. There doesn't seem to be this the immovable force against the irresistible force, immovable object against the irresistible force.
No, I think there's a little bit more parity this year. I think it was pretty obvious, last year, and maybe some people kind of forgot that when Baylor had the COVID pause and they didn't look themselves for this first couple of games like how good Baylor was. But I think it was obvious if you were truly locked into the sport that those were the two teams, really from the start. I certainly don't think we have that this year. I think we have. I felt like we had 7 or 8 teams that you felt good about, heading into this past weekend, and maybe that weekend opens up the field even more. And a team like Arkansas is playing really, really good basketball. A team like Illinois is really explosive. Wisconsin's playing great. I was up in Madison last night to watch them against Purdue. That was a tremendous game, right? So I think you start to open the field a little bit. Villanova's playing great. So it feels very wide open. I think Gonzaga's probably the best team. The analytics, flex that out as well. But you can make a case for several teams as the favorite to win, and I wouldn't argue with you.
Kevin, what am I supposed to think of Duke? I mean, they've got a great record, but the ACC is as bad as it's ever been this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the talent level jumps off the page. I mean, when you watch them, they have 4 and potentially 5 guys who will be first-round picks this year, which is not everything, but it certainly matters. And, I think, when you have Bencaro as the focal point, but also Griffin shooting the ball, Williams up front, who's so physical and kind of took the game away from Drew Timme when Gonzaga played Duke in November. I think there's a lot of attractive parts with this team. I think the thing that's frustrating with them is, they haven't shown me the kind of killer instinct I want with a team in March. I mean, they played a lot of games in the ACC that have been closer than they should have been against mediocre competition and NIT caliber clubs. So I think that's been frustrating. It's something to watch as they get into March. Can they put on consistent performance? But I think Duke at its best, the Duke we saw play Gonzaga in Vegas, the Duke we saw dismantle North Carolina in the Dean Dome in early February, that Duke team can absolutely win a national championship. It might be the favorite.
So, Kevin, last night, I know that you mentioned that you were at the Wisconsin-Purdue game, and I was seeing little updates here and there, and all of a sudden my timeline's just Jaden Ivey, and then a few moments later it's Wisconsin Badgers, Chucky Hepburn, all this. What was that scene like in Madison?
It was crazy, and the fans were as into it as any fan base I've seen all year. I've been to a lot of great games. That one's right up there. I thought Ivey didn't really play his best basketball for 32, 33 minutes. And then, the final 7, he was just on a tear. He scored 3 straight buckets in isolation that should have won them the game. I mean, quite frankly, Purdue deserved to win that game with how they played down the stretch. But Wisconsin got a banked-in bucket from Johnny Davis and a banked-in 3 from Chucky Hepburn to win the game. And it was a good reminder of how much better Wisconsin's role players have been than I think people give credit for. Tyler Wall and Chucky Hepburn made 2 huge shots for them down the stretch, and those guys are a huge reason Wisconsin's the Big Ten champs. It was a absolutely fantastic basketball game, and this Wisconsin team just continues to find ways, even considering that people kind of question their talent level.
It's been a crazy few days, but and we are now in March, so we're allowed to have some more crazy after the weekend of 7 teams on Saturday. And Kevin, great stuff. Love the work. Appreciate your time, and also you noticing what Adam Flagler does for this team and how critical he was against Oklahoma State, and then also, of course, down the stretch against Texas. Thanks for your time. That's Kevin Sweeney, SINow.com, covers the national landscape of college basketball, including, of course, the madness last night, Purdue, Wisconsin, another game that caught, as you were talking about, Craig. And, boy, I tell you what, Ivey is fantastic. I was watching him in the game they had, I guess it was during the weekend. I forgot who it was against. Was it Michigan State or whoever it might have been? I'm going blank on the opponent. Man, is he fun to watch. They've got the big, tall drink of water inside, but I enjoy watching him as well. We are now joined by